How are you? Nice to see you. Happy Friday.
Yes, you too.
I need to
Um,
rename myself to Molly because Martha is my legal name, but
oh,
Nina.
I was gonna say I recognize you, but I didn't recognize the name. I was like, did I? Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Yeah.
How have things been on your end?
Good, crazy, but good. How about you?
Oh yeah, crazy. Yeah,
I
same. Go
I have
ahead.
to say your Austin VBC session. I was like, that looks like fun. I sent it to like two of my friends who are enmeshed in that space. I was
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love for them to come out and you too, honestly, if you wanted to be a part of it. It was really great. Like that was our first kind of attempts at an event, like an in-person event, and we
Yeah.
decided to do VBC just because it's more like tactical topic rather than like I feel like hospitality can bounce around a little bit between
Yeah.
things. And yeah, so it was like 50 folks and a lot of like great dialogue, and there was like kind of an intense part of the day, kind of in like the late morning where we had some like disagreement and actual good like back and
Good,
forth and
good.
yeah, so I was thankful and glad that like, people had that space to,
Hash it out.
share things in that forum. And I was like, hey, I'm not like this is for you guys. I'm not like gonna publish this in hospitality or anything, like stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it was good. Um,
That's
okay,
cool.
so you mentioned you're crazy. What's going on in your world?
I mean, it's just wild to adapt to the landscape, like, there's kind of like the external environment, there's a lot of change, and, um, I experience it the most at a workforce level. Like, it's just like working in big systems, people are having a hard time. And like I always like to say, like healthcare is the work of people, both in terms of like, how it gets done and also who we care for.
Yeah.
And so I just see like vulnerability everywhere, like it's just so things feel very fragile. So and then the Massachusetts market in general, like we've had a lot of consolidation recently,
Mm-hmm.
and the ripple effects of that, like what happened with Steward, and their implosion, that takes us 3 years to ingest and adapt. All those providers going, getting the MPIs updated, rerouting patients, attributing Medicaid lives. Like there's so many downstream impacts from something like that that it's really challenging. I would at You've talked a little, was it in hospitality? I saw Newsom's private equity legislature play for
Yeah.
California.
Just very high level. I haven't looked
I
into
know,
it
but I
too
want you
much.
to talk more about that. I think private equity in healthcare and the role of government in regulating or not that is a like having lived this firsthand, it is
Yeah.
such a complicated and nuanced conversation because like I also saw your innovation piece, which that came out last night that I forwarded to a
Yep.
friend. I'm like, that's
Well,
good
thanks.
stuff. And so it's just like that tension between innovation and private equity and how do you use it as a force for good or not. Like, I think that thread is something to really interrogate in the healthcare space.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I agree. I think it's really interesting. Just because private equity, rightfully so in certain instances, has been treated as kind of this boogeyman or like the, negative emotion a lot of the time. Eric, I see you're on as well. How are you doing? But I remember a conversation, Eric, you and I had, or maybe an email you sent me around how, maybe private equity's role is more of like that kind of growth equity vehicle rather than like a, leveraged buyout or, hey, let's buy up these facilities with a lot of like, real estate and other assets. And then we can do a lot of things in the background and create propco, opco, all of these things and slice and dice. Like maybe we like limit that. Like we still want private investment, but, maybe it's not, um, maybe it's in some sort of limited capacity. I've written about private equity before, like some stuff, and like you said, it's like super hairy. Like we don't want to discourage um, capital from coming into healthcare, but how do you like incentivize, but also have checks and balances? But also like to your point around like innovation, uh, a vehicle like private equity could be really good in like providing a true like sense of urgency, like so venture and private equity, right? Like to, you've got like a 3 to 7 year hold period or whatever. And so if you're making investments, you got to like move the needle quickly. And so, that's interesting too. I don't know. I feel like I just threw a lot of jumbled thoughts out there, but um, like you said, it's very nuanced. Eric, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, a couple things. Sorry to jump in. And Molly, if we haven't met, great to meet you. Sounds like you're Boston or Massachusetts somewhere.
Yeah, I work for Mass General Brigham.
Ah, okay.
So,
Okay, great. So I'm in Nashville and
nice.
have been with one of those private equity boogeymen that Blake's mentioned, and probably one of the most infamous that led to the No Surprises Act. That was Envisioned Healthcare. Private equity was KKR. The predecessor company that I was with was actually AmSearch that merged with Envision Healthcare, two public companies in 2016, 2018. KKR, at that time, the largest transaction for them. They might have exceeded it now, but about a $10 billion transaction, and all kind of stuff that actually that Blake wrote about. I think, Blake, that's where you and I met. You wrote a piece on that, and I
I,
sent you an
I
one.
think I did. It was kind of a spicy one. It was like about, the downfalls of Envision and, um, how they tried to play ball with United and all that stuff.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, for sure. It's No Surprises Act. It's UHC versus provider organizations, bad behavior, let's call it. Um, a lot of it, I believe, is personally led to the public discourse and dissatisfaction that was on full display with the murder of Brian Thompson and
Mm.
subsequent events there. Um, one piece that I've been reading about it, like I'm not sure I shared this with you, but about 20 of us from Nashville, actually the week before you were in town here recently, visited Leeds and London. And our Chamber of Commerce, as you might have heard, is interested in. We're getting more and more foreign delegations, and a lot of early stage companies that are interested in commercializing in the U.S. and that typically happens in New York and Boston, as Molly would know. And more frequently, Nashville is becoming a place of interest because of
Mm.
the healthcare expertise that's here and sort of easy to get to in the United States, and an ecosystem of folks that have been primarily on the provider side for 6 decades or so. Um, and when we visited over there, there was a CEO. I think he's going to come back to Nashville in May. I found him to be a really good speaker. He was with Cambridge Health Partners, one of the NHS trusts there, and he held up two books. And there's about 100 people there, and about maybe 20 or 25 of us from the U.S. Um, and he said, for American colleagues, I'd recommend, and I had just finished it on the plane on the way over there, but it is a book called Abundance by Ezra Klein, and really talks about the long-term
I've heard of that.
infrastructure needs. It's really a good read because it says, for significant change to occur in healthcare, housing, transportation, these are really, really difficult long-term infrastructure investments that are
Mm.
required. We're seeing it now with energy, and how, what's the path forward when permitting and federal and states and short-term returns from investors like venture capital leads to more incremental innovation versus really building, an infrastructure that can build new markets. But the other book that he held up is one that I'm now deep into, and I love it. And it's called Serendipity. It doesn't happen by accident, and it's about
Mm.
the author is from Cambridge, and he has been involved in like 60 breakthrough innovations of either companies, biotech, et cetera, all around healthcare and the innovation ecosystem that is in and about Cambridge. And it's this mix of academic organizations and industry and capital and advisors and mentors and media, and all of that sort of makes things work. And it's what I believe we have here in music and in healthcare is you've got these really well built out ecosystems. But what his premise is, which is interesting to me, is you can actually architect a little bit of your success. That everything is not luck. If you've listened to Guy Raz, who's got a great podcast called How I Built This, he always asks the founders of these companies at the end of the show, how much of your success was luck or how much of it was skill and talent, and the founders are all over the place in how they answer that. Um, and many of them, when I listen to them, are just like pure lucky, in my opinion. Like they meet somebody on an airplane, and then something happens, and they build this company, and it goes in certain places. Serendipity is about if you build these connected networks, within ecosystems that are more chaotic than structured, which to me is interesting, is you're more likely to really build those organizations that are going to deliver value over the long term. The second piece of that is what you were talking about, venture capital and private equity, and my own thoughts. Blake, I know you know Ann Summers. That we had a session on this with Clayton Christensen. Speaking of Boston, his foundation and legacy is around healthcare and education. Ann Summers Hogg, who Blake and I know, you might know her as well, Molly, writes for them. She writes healthcare research. She's really good on his theories. And he wrote a paper in 2015 that I've been spending a little time with. It's sort of an essay document, but it's called The Capitalist Dilemma. And his premise is that if you look at capital, and at that time, 15 through say today's date, as an abundant resource versus a scarce resource, then you would invest for the longer term and your expectation horizons would be longer. What's happening now on the venture side is those expectations are shorter in terms of return, and they lead companies to develop things that are, in my opinion, are just sort of incremental innovations to get to the next step where the value goes up and somebody can get out and a company can continue to raise. And you never arrive at the point of where you started out, Molly, is like some of this stuff takes a long time. And the enterprise organizations that need the data assets and the data platforms in order to ingest innovation, in my opinion, is going to take a long time. And the innovators on the other side of that ledger are like doing things almost overnight, where their solutions are changing and growing, for the good exponentially. But that sort of that intersection between the two, and whoever finances that has to have, at least a decade of, expectations on the return side. And I think this is playing out in energy, is if you, all these big data centers that are expected to do incredible things for the US economy that will require, massive amounts, megawatts of energy. If we don't really think about sort of the long-term investments that are going to be necessary to drive these industries of the future, you're ever stuck in this race of just doing things that are just slightly incrementally better.
That's interesting. Especially that kind of that note on energy, because what makes me think of like the pressing, or what's like driving that is like AI needs a ton of energy, right? And so like there's this like private, very, very vested private interest in developing better like energy, like fusion or whatever that is. And that might take a long time, but like because there's so much demand, they're able to like pitch the long-term vision and like maintain capital in the short term, because they're also like, using the like AI for various use cases and stuff like that. That's really interesting, because I remember like seeing in the news, Microsoft bought or like invested in Fusion or something, or like bought like the rights to the first fusion center in a certain area or something like that.
Even things like small nuclear reactor modules, which are, in Tennessee. I don't know if you know about Oak Ridge. It's East Tennessee. It's the home of TVA. There's a nuclear power plant there. The Manhattan Project was sort of in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where a lot of the science came out of. It's maybe 5 to 10 years before these these new forms of energy that are cleaner energy than today's will really get launched. And at the same time, in Abilene, Texas, OpenAI's data center, which when they get done with that will be stunningly as large as Central Park in New
Wow.
York City, which is just a massive. And when Sam Altman just recently toured it, and he's talking, everybody now talks in terms of these AI data centers in terms of megawatts, and his expectation, it was like by a factor of 100 of what we're going to need just 3 to 5 years from now versus what this
Wow.
one plant will actually do. And if you believe that this AI race is about America and China for a number of different reasons, economics and defense and other industries, China is way ahead of developing the infrastructure, mostly solar and wind, frankly, than where the U.S. is, and now has the ability to stand up these large, data centers that are going to drive the AI activity in many different industries, way beyond healthcare, in the future. So when I think of it, I mean, I'm 100% optimistic that AI at many levels for good will make significant change. And back to your article on the innovation paradox, as you guys know, we have 25 to 30% of administrative cost, and Trillion released a report today that said 60% of what a health system spends is administrative, 35% is direct patient care, and those percentages are getting wider, not smaller. And if there was ever a technology that could really take a chunk out of this 5 trillion and allow us to see more patients, and not have the high cost burden that we do 2x to 3x in other parts of the world, then it's technology and innovation that I think will get us there. Now the trick is, like, how do you do it? And so
Right.
Have you,
Yeah.
you all experienced ambient AI in real life?
I have. I mean, as a patient, I have.
Yeah.
And Blake's close to a company, uh, Augmetics, that did an HCA deal. I work with a company called Ambience, that's one of the front runners and just raised another significant amount of money. At Vanderbilt, they use a Physician IC, uses forget what they use the Microsoft product. Um,
Nuance,
yeah,
Dragon, or whatever it is.
yeah,
That.
and
As a patient, like I the providers are so much happier. Like I had a doctor's appointment with my kiddo 2 weeks ago, and I was like, hello, this is a different experience, So like it's fun to see the use cases in real life, and especially like with something as like, like I consider physician burnout a crisis. And so I'm like, to watch in real time that needle move, I'm like, what a time to be alive. So
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not. I completely agree. I think all the studies show satisfaction is way up. Yeah, with all of the tools, and if you look at your visit summaries after they do it, they're pretty good. I'm
I
not very.
love that. Like I'm the person that reads it because I work in healthcare, so I care and I want to see it.
Yeah. And like that's gonna, like, from a business perspective, or like both labor in general, like that's gonna expand into over time. Like it's not perfect today, but like it's gonna expand into like specialties, other specialist care, and like mental health, but also like nurses and those roles as well. So it's like very exciting,
Yeah.
a lot of documentation burden reduction, and also like serves as a potential competitive advantage, right? Like, so, let's say you use like one of the better ones. I don't know which one's like the best. I think a lot of them are pretty good at this point as far as like base table stake stuff. But like you're a nurse working for one of those health systems that uses one, and then like you're like, oh, I'll do a contract over here, or like I'll leave and go somewhere else. Then you're like, oh well, they don't have this. This sucks. Like the experience is going to be drastically different from a like labor perspective, and I imagine that would potentially drive like implications as far as like retention and like you're saying, Molly, just like burnout. People will be
100%.
happier.
Yeah.
um
There's a company called Open Evidence. Like you might have written about them, that is got a crazy valuation now, and they've got the rights to New England and JAMA, and I've actually used that for just some family situations, and they've got a way where you can access it for free. I think providers with an MPI can gain another level of access. But
Mhm.
Blake, after you left Nashville in our pitch event, the company that won it, they're going to be at Health, by the way, was a company from Belfast that's doing really, really well in the UK and in the US called Olis Medical, EOLAS. And Olis, I didn't know this until a week ago, but
Okay, I met him at the app happy hour you
okay.
invited me to. So I can't remember what his name was, but he was really interesting and was telling me how it was kind of like a localized open evidence, essentially, right?
Yeah, what they
I'll let
do,
you
and I
explain.
completely get it. Like when I was at AmSurge, we had 260, 270 surgery centers, and all the patient safety and all the clinical guidelines, all the protocols were proprietary to us, but they were based on compliance requirements and best practices and safety, and our clinical quality teams that were highly qualified. And it was not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, that the distribution of those things were in massive 3-ring binders. And I know you guys have seen them, but it's all these documents that are proprietary to the organization. That's it. Yeah, right there. That are that
That's so
are
funny.
and then SharePoint for us was a massive upgrade because, well, you didn't have to mail out these things and people didn't have to punch 3-ring holes and replace, a new protocol, but you could do that electronically. So what Olus does, the company that you saw them at, is they bring into contacts a company's own proprietary clinical documentation, protocols, and guidelines at the point of care. So it's almost like open evidence. You're working as a pediatric case on this particular issue, and you're looking for a protocol for maybe, medication prescription for an infant of this, height and weight. And you can, if you're taking your own documents, but incorporating them, integrating them with ambient documentation, but providing the tables and charts and the
Yeah.
reference material and the point of care. So it's like not going to your desk and pulling out the binder, or not even going to SharePoint and searching.
Do they does that sit next to an open evidence like clinical decision support, or is it like the same just more kind of nuanced organizationally specific? Like how does that kind of play?
Yeah, they're trying to get is a good question. They're trying to get it incorporated into the workflow of whatever tools the organization uses. So if
Okay.
you're on Beck, or if you're on, an EHR application, and or you use ambient clinical documentation, then how could they provide it's using what's called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and then computer vision to do the charts and tables. But what they're really, really working on, starting bottoms up approach. They might be in your place, Molly. They're in about 50 health systems in the US, but they go to these individual doctors, just like open evidence, like the three of us. And we say, oh, I tried this and I used this. And pretty soon it just takes off and it sort of overwhelms the organization, where everybody then wants to, have access to it.
So that's what we're seeing a lot of. So this is what's really interesting to me about this time. Massachusetts, as you know, is like incredibly regulated. And I'm watching industry push regulation, like because of the way that private equity and innovation are kind of organically entering the market. Regulation is almost being responsive to it. And there's a couple of examples. One is we have a massive primary care shortage, we being Massachusetts, but also Mass General Brigham. We recently rolled out a first touch AI solution for primary care where like they can get you on the phone with the PCP within 30 minutes, but you're first engaging with an AI solution. And so like the whole like existential question for like and serving like Medicaid, it's like everyone. And so it's like what is the regulatory implications of that and how do you provide oversight? There's no good answers. So that's number one. Number two is we have this quirky deal with CVS where we're leveraging their clinics also to solve for our primary care gaps and looking at the ways in which that's credentialed and clinical quality oversight is provided. um, you know, another area where the spirit of the regulation absolutely can be addressed. And, this is a scenario that the regulation never anticipated. And so it's kind of this like, how do you fix this into the existing construct? And I'm fascinated to see where we go with it, and this tension between, I mean, my personal opinion is like always follow the money, and it's just really interesting to watch how money and industry is pushing regulatory oversight at this point.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to jump in and then Blake, I might have to leave. It's great meeting you, Molly, and I look forward to doing this. But at Health, I tell you one thing I'm going to watch. I'd love your opinion. Blake, you might have saw it, but there was a guy on the last panel of the day on the regulatory panel from CHAI, the Coalition for Health AI.
Yes.
That and he was the COO. We had invited the CEO and we had invited somebody for ASTP, but because our event was on October 1st, it was the first day of the shutdown, that the guy from the federal government could not attend.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, like we picked the wrong date. If we'd have done it one day earlier, he could have made it. But this very public, it's going on and it's kind of ugly between Marty McCary and another director within HHS calling these industry coalitions. And to your point, Molly, that like the federal government, in my opinion, cannot keep pace from the regulatory frameworks of what's occurring. And in the One Big Beautiful Bill, you might have saw early that there was a 10-year moratorium on state regulations of AI that didn't pass, that was not part of the bill. So now you have states, like 1,000 regs have already been passed by states. You have the federal government that is not keeping pace, who's taken shots at these well-respected industry coalitions that are led by Mayo Clinic and other prestigious organizations that are producing these almost like nutrition label guidelines for all of the companies that are developing AI algorithms. It's something like I would support because you sort of have this
They're great.
best practice verified, source of AI. And they're saying, no, that's our responsibility. And the industry's saying they're going to take this on it. Health, by the way, Blake, there's the CEO of Chai is going to take like an open Q&A session. But if the federal government and healthcare does not keep pace with this crazy pace of innovation that's occurring on the AI side, then we'll never get to the tools, that can unlock the very value that everybody is expecting. And therefore the investor, the capital associated with it, I think is going to be challenged, at least the early stage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I'll definitely try to make it out to that open Q&A. And I think somebody responded to my newsletter and said like, hey, you should connect with Chai like after the newsletter yesterday. So that could be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Some of this, Blake, I'm sorry for joining late. I had a prior.
No worries.
Some of this, Eric, is also the broader political environment around AI and what happened under Biden. Obviously, the Silicon Valley folks who were, pushing a more light touch. I think Chai, just because it has some of those larger institutions behind it, and whatever the standards are around whether it was coercion to join or whatever else, I think that's what was getting conflicted. But to your point, like the data on how all these services are being used, and do customers, Molly, find them super helpful or useful, or when do they work and not, like that's getting lost in the mix too, I think, in terms of that data gathering or that ability to unify data, which ironically is exactly the thing AI should be able to do.
Right. So, right. No, completely agree. It's fun to be in healthcare in the year. What year are we in? 2025. Yeah. Hey, Blake, I got a dash. Great meeting you guys. And
All right. See, Eric.
well,
Let's connect to health.
okay. Bye-bye.
See ya.
I do like, Jeremy, that you just acknowledged there's people that are involved that we actually care about their experience and outcomes. So, like, thank you for anchoring us to reality.
Well, I think one of the things, I'm sorry, Blake, I didn't know where you want to take this, Art.
No, it's open ended, so go for it.
I mean, one of the things that sort of is intriguing to me in Molly in the AI stuff and how this is being used is, and to your point about following the money, is it's keyed around an episode or desire for an interaction, as opposed to, what is the semi-passive, semi-active, ongoing kind of interaction that somebody could have with an AI that is aggregating its data and, not in the annoying way my Apple tells me, like, you haven't closed your loop in 8 days, right? Which makes me feel like I've sucked. I do. But just sort of prompts them of like, hey, it looks like you're moving more, or like, how have you been feeling? Or you've been on this, you got the script 2 weeks ago. Have you noticed any changes? Like that kind of ongoing, and then the ability to aggregate it and then have the person, potentially voice or otherwise overwrite it before it go. Like that's the sort of continuous, to me, that where AI really gets helpful. There is obviously, because of to exactly what you said, the shortages, like we got to have some way of triaging. But if you have some sort of continuous, not always on, but like event driven or activity driven gathering of information, you avoid sort of the Doppler effect of needing, for the not for the chronic conditions, you avoid the Doppler effect of needing AI urgently, for that visit.
Yeah. I'm very open that my professional drive is very much tied to the fact that I have a child who has a rare disease. And I am really interested in what you described at a population or disease type level. And
Yeah.
especially with chronic illness, for him, he has an orthopedic condition that requires surgical intervention. And I've been like, could we please get wearables that start to get some predictive, like, okay, like longitudinally have declined in this way. We're seeing it with your sleep metrics. Like my Aura ring died. And so like, but like, well, I had that. Like I knew my stats, and so being able to leverage that sort of like data in a big way, we just haven't gotten to a point where like I mean, think how far we've come. I learned about ChatGPT what, like 9 months ago, and now like me and Chat are like my Chat's a girl because I'm a lady, but like Chat and I are like, coworkers. And so the potential and the ability to execute on it is huge.
Yeah.
Blake, do you deal with AI governance at a system level?
I mean, I've heard kind of others talk about it. Somebody that might be interesting to talk to on that front, as far as like kind of guardrails and things like that, would be Ann Summers that Eric mentioned. She does a lot of research for the Christensen Institute. I'm happy to connect you. But she's really
We have
very
to look
thoughtful
into
person.
this. Yeah, no, I'm
She's
happy
fabulous.
you're writing.
Yeah,
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 she's-
absolutely.
yeah.
Jeremy, you know her?
I do. I've been talking to her about life for health stuff as well.
Oh, sweet, awesome.
She's fabulous.
There we go. Yeah. But something, Molly, I was gonna talk about with Aura, and Jeremy, with what you were talking about, like kind of like with nudges, or like apparently like a lot of the conversation that's been around like behavior change in healthcare and in general too, right? Is like the idea that you can use like both wearables and like this longitudinal data over time, and like apparently nudges are very powerful to invoke that change, like you were saying, like those kind of micro touch points over time. And I think Aura specifically is very interesting from the sense that they seem to be really trying to push into traditional healthcare a lot. Like they're at like a ton of conferences with like they're partnered with Essence Healthcare in Chicago, which is like a Medicare Advantage plan. And they've like been to like every conference talking with their Medicare Advantage kind of partner on like what they're doing and like use cases in sleep apnea and other stuff, but also like I don't know to what extent, but they have integrated into certain interfaces for clinicians. I'm not sure like how real that is, but they say that's what they're doing. And then on top of that, they talk about how a lot of seniors actually engage a ton with the Aura Ring. Like one, because it's like you don't need to charge it a ton, and the battery lasts a long time, and it's just kind of like the use case is very easy, but also there's like a misnomer around like seniors and how much they actually can engage with, technology and things like that. I think they said Aura users over 65 engage. It was something and it was like 6 times a week or something pretty actually good. And so, MA plans are all after all the engagement metrics, right? And all that kind of stuff. So I just find it interesting. And I also noticed, they just raised like $900 million or something. They've shifted their company description to be, or the maker of the Aura Ring has fundraised, whatever amount. And so they've also announced a partnership with like Dexcom. And so I'm very curious, like, you have $900 million and you're one of the leading wearables for like, tracking female fertility and like these emerging use cases. Like, it's exciting. I don't know what the future holds, but there's a lot of like signals to indicate they're trying to move in that direction. And then at what point, my question is like, at what point do they just become like a remote patient monitoring company, right? And then just like tack on those CPT codes or whatever. I don't know, but it's just
I'm there for it.
yeah, for sure.
There is an Aura API. I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, they're definitely looking at like promoting that.
Interesting.
I hadn't heard. So I'm like, thank you for bringing up two of my favorite topics. MA, I technically brought up Aura, but I'm like Aura and MA. I'm like, what the collab for MLR we didn't know we needed. Like, I'm like, that's so great. Jeremy, where are you from and what's your healthcare orientation?
Well, right now I'm based in DC, and I most of my health experience has been in consumer health. I was part of the startup team of Health Central back in the aughts, and then ran WebMD Medscape for about a year. But as Blake knows, I've my passion is sort of fixing chronic disease. And so I've written a book called Life for Health, which I'm turning into a business, which is about using life insurance as the basis for creating long-term alignment to solve chronic disease, starting with metabolic disease, and using the longitudinal data that you gain along the way to also help in cancer and, dementia and other kinds of things. So that's what I'm doing.
Very cool. I'm headed down to DC tomorrow for NORD. There's the rare disease conferences this weekend. And my sister's in just outside Maryland. Do you know those people in Florida that have that like really intense longevity clinic? I'll have to see if I can find the name. There's this couple down in Florida that is running I'm like totally blanking on the name, but they're really into like wellness, disrupting chronic disease.
I swear I saw an article on that at some point.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Great. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, longevity is an interesting topic.
Well, I think it's the challenge is that you need to, with the chronic disease and increasing health span, is you have to counteract the disease liability that's already built up in the system while you're also preventing it or appealing to people that are earlier on. And so that's why, I would argue you really need kind of a life insurance connection, or, something that is a longitudinal financial structure that can adjust to people's changing situations as they age or their situations change and stuff. So,
is that like leveraging like whole life insurance? Like, is it like using that as a lever to like, can you just give me your elevator pitch for what it is?
Sure. Yeah. So basically the idea for Life for Health is to end metabolic multimorbidity. And the goal is get people to Medicare age without metabolic multimorbidity. And from there, you can expand into other, chronic diseases, autoimmune, and so on. And basically what it is a combination of a universal life insurance policy, which could be done through an employer, and think of it like a supercharged VBC provider, the full expanse of metabolic services from drugs or reference to surgery, plus all of the wrapper kinds of things. And whether that Life for Health entity does it all itself or contracts with other VBC providers is, to be determined. But basically the idea is you meet people where they have some degree of metabolic health, and let's talk about somebody who has obesity and diabetes, and you have a conversation with them that basically says this is a benefit that will help you reverse your condition and maintain your health. And, you get a sense of what their risk appetite is and what they're willing to do or not. And you have those conversations. And you basically set health outcome goals. And basically on achieving those health outcome goals, individuals can earn fairly sizable dollar awards that go into the universal life policy. And so that's the benefit, is those monetary awards can grow tax-free over time until retirement. So it can create a whole nest egg that you can use for retirement or for healthcare or whatever else later on, or if you need it for a critical illness along the way. But it's that way to really create that individual accountability. And obviously the size of those outcome payments can be determined based on the size of change, the age that somebody's at, their persistence over time. And it's not just about when you see sort of like episodically with GLP-1s, people go on and off after a year or so. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that there's not a cohesive clinical layer that's wrapped around all of those kinds of things. But you can create not only the incentives for getting to a better place, but maintaining that better trajectory over time.
Cool. I mean, definitely.
There's a long elevator ride.
No, it's complicated. And I think in the landscape of like, healthcare consumerism, like we are making that pivot where people understand they're in the driver's seat in terms of their health and outcomes. And so I think like tying like literal rewards to their engagement is like a natural next step of where the market's been going. So very cool. Good for you.
Yeah, that's cool. I agree. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
Wait, no, I'm good. Thank you. This is lovely. But also, weren't we going to talk about cancer? And like, did I miss that? Was this
What about like OneOncology? The OneOncology stuff?
I thought they were coming here. Are they not coming?
No, they're not. But like, I could set that up if you're interested in that.
No. I just read here. Maybe I conflated them in my head. I was like, oh, I'm going to log in here what the OneOncology strategy is. We're doing a strategic partnership with Tampa General, standing up rad-onc services in Florida. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to go see what they're up to, so that I now I suddenly care about the Florida cancer landscape.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because they're very gung-ho about pulling that volume out of, the hospital into like the community-based setting. So, they're trying to build out their own density of like those. I mean, they bought like a bankrupt asset, so who knows what that looks like. But they're very optimistic around having that ambulatory type approach where it's like, okay, it's similar to the private equity model. I mean, they are essentially like a physician aggregator, right? But they, bought this partner or anchor practice in Florida in like associated areas, and then some rad-onc too, I think. I'm not sure about like the entire footprint, but it was like 100 specialists, oncologists, urologists. And then from there, it's like, okay, let's build out light ancillaries. So they're looking to build out imaging and then like advanced imaging where it makes sense. There's a lot of they talked a lot about like the potential for urologists and building ASCs in the space. That being said, like there's already a lot of like pre-existing affiliations and equity at play and like those sorts of things. So that'll kind of be an uphill battle. But for them, it's like, they're attached to that drug distributor now, Cencora. And so what they can immediately do is say, one, okay, let's lock you into this like lower or like I don't even know if it's lower, but like Cencora can lock them into like a 20-year contract or whatever on like the drug distribution and get like a larger rebate, those sorts of things with pharma. And then obviously that taps into all of the oncology drug spend that's happening over the next 10 or whatever, however many years. And then they can get higher rates, but they can justify it by saying, hey, we're still lower than the hospital down the street. We're still community. We're still independent. Yeah. And then there's like some other stuff in there too, right? Like obvious kind of MSO synergies and stuff. But that's kind of like the playbook, I guess. If that makes sense. I don't know if there's anything specific within that you're interested in.
One more question that's totally unrelated, but just like in terms of like industry trends and disruption, because you just touched on several, right? Like community-based, like general move away from hospitals, ASCs, like outpatient, like all of those themes. Have you seen or heard anything promising about micro hospitals? Is that something you're exposed to?
I've seen several health systems like stand up the micro hospital strategy. I just I don't know how
I don't
sustainable it
What's
is.
there. No, I agree. I'm like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? So I'm like, what am I missing?
I'd be curious to see what you found because, like, for me, it's like short term. I think it makes sense because you can stand up a 30-bed facility and it's a hospital, Medicare certified,
Yeah.
full service, and like you can put that in like a suburb, right? So that's like 90% commercial or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but like long term, that's like adding costs to the systems, and payers are like, okay, why can't you just like put a freestanding ED here? We're not going to pay for this. Like, we're going to go out of network kind of thing. So in my opinion, unless it's like serving like a very, I don't know, maybe a rural need, or like there's like a desert or something like that where that community can only support, like maybe it's like a planned community or something. I don't know. In my opinion, I kind of find it unsustainable.
I agree. And the only use case I was trying to like think through is disrupting a market. Like if you're trying to enter a new market and if you're like, I'm hanging my flag here, like, is it a way to like short term get a presence? But like for all the reasons you just identified, I don't get it. But like I've also seen a decent amount of press on it recently. And so like in a landscape of consolidation, I'm like, and what is this, pray tell? So I'm just like, I'm always interested when I see something new and quirky, and that falls in that bucket, I would say. So
Yeah, and I'm gonna say it was at Vive or maybe Health prior year. I talked to Imerus's chief maybe development officer or something. But their like core strategy is, I think, both freestanding ED and micro hospital. Like they put up stand up joint ventures. So I'd be interested to hear just like their kind of company line, and like maybe he'd be more forthcoming with you around like economics and those sorts of things.
what
But
is say the name of the organization one more time? I just want to look it up quickly.
Imerus,
Okay.
Emerus.
Okay.
I don't know a ton about them. I just met
Yeah.
I can't remember who I met, but one of their chief kind of, I think, biz dev kind of guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they've announced several. I want to say that maybe there was a Modern Healthcare article on that too, maybe on micro hospitals. But they've stood up several JVs. They have like 50 micro hospital facilities, and they do it with health systems, so it's like less sketchy versus like I don't know if you remember, I wrote about Nutex Health, and they're like doing this insane kind of out of network purposeful strategy, taking advantage of like No Surprises Act to attach their rates to like the hospital rates in their region, and then like having a 95% commercial payer mix. It's like insane. But that's why I say like overall, I think the strategy is going to come under scrutiny, and you probably need to like pick and choose where you want to stand those up long term. Just my opinion.
Yeah, that was good. All right. Happy Friday. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, all. Great conversation. See you guys next time.
Take care. See ya.
Thanks, Blake.
Okay.
Thanks, Beach Ball. Bye.